She didn't think he'd recognize her. It had been years, after all. But when the signal was made, something stirred in the old dog's eyes that no one expected. Sarah Taylor stood at the corner of the street, her eyes locked on Max, the German shepherd she had known since childhood. Max had been her father's partner on the force, a bond forged through countless late-night patrols and shared battles against crime. She remembered how he used to nuzzle her as a child, and how she would feed him treats, promising him she'd always take care of him. But life had a way of pulling them apart. After her father's sudden death, Max had been reassigned, and their paths diverged. Sarah couldn't forget him, not for a moment. Every time she heard a siren, she thought of Max, running alongside her father, a silent guardian. Now here he was, in front of her, doing what he did best. Working, sniffing out trouble. But she hadn't seen him in years, and she wasn't sure if he'd still recognize her. He was with another police unit now, and to Sarah's surprise, he looked a little different. Older, perhaps, more stoic. Yet, that familiar gleam in his eyes remained. The kind of gaze that held 1,000 unspoken stories. Sarah stood still, her heart racing as she watched him, but she knew this wasn't the time to run up to him. No, she had to be patient. She had to make the right move. Slowly, she raised her hand and made the silent signal, the one her father had taught her long ago when they used to train Max. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to anyone who knew what to look for, it was unmistakable. She knew it would be a long shot, but if Max recognized it, if he remembered, everything could change. The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Then it happened. Max's ears perked up. His body froze for a moment, and Sarah could feel her breath catch in her throat. He was staring at her, his amber eyes locking onto hers. The years seemed to melt away, and in that instant, the bond they once shared seemed to reignite. Max took a few cautious steps forward, then stopped, his head tilting slightly as if he were trying to process what he was seeing. Sarah's heart pounded. In her chest. Was he really remembering her? Was the bond still there? Max moved closer, slowly, his movements deliberate and measured. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he trusted Sarah. He'd always trusted her, even when they hadn't been together for so long. And just like that, Max reached out, nuzzling her hand gently. A wave of emotion hit Sarah, and she couldn't hold back the tears. The connection was unmistakable. He remembered. The bond between them, forged in the quiet moments of their shared past, was still alive. Sarah knelt down, her hand running through Max's fur as the years seemed to slip away. He wasn't just her father's dog. He was her dog, too. The silent signal had worked, and in that simple, quiet moment, everything she had been longing for was finally back in her arms. The reunion wasn't just about her and Max. It was about the loyalty that transcended time, the bond that neither distance nor years could sever. Sarah couldn't believe what she was feeling. As Max nuzzled her hand, the years of separation seemed to dissolve into the air. The bond was undeniable, but there was something else. Something deeper. She stroked his fur gently, the familiar texture bringing back memories of childhood, of days spent running in the park with her father by her side. Those days felt like they belonged to someone else now, a different life. Her heart ached, but it was a good ache. She wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Max was here, right in front of her, just as loyal and protective as he had always been. She knelt down, pulling him closer, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. The world around them seemed to fade away, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt at peace. But then, the reality of their situation began to settle back in. She wasn't here just for a reunion. There was something more pressing on her mind. Max had been working with a new unit, and from what she had heard, things weren't going well. The team was struggling, the pressure mounting with each passing day. Sarah knew that Max wasn't just any dog. He was trained for the toughest of situations, the kind of situations that most people would never dream of handling. But even Max had his limits. She could see it in his eyes. The weariness, the exhaustion from years of service. As much as she wanted to pull him away from all of that, she knew it wasn't possible. Max still had a job to do, and it was one he took seriously. Sarah stood up slowly, wiping the tears from her eyes. She took a deep breath, collecting herself. "Max," she whispered, "we're going to get through this together." The words felt heavy on her tongue, but they were true. She wasn't about to let him face whatever was coming alone. She would stand by his side, just like she had when they were children, just like her father had before her. They had always been a team. Now, they were a team again. Max looked up at her, his amber eyes filled with an unspoken understanding. It was as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. Together, they had been through so much. Nothing would break their bond. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the city as it swirled around them. Sarah could feel the cool breeze against her skin, but in that moment, all she could feel was the warmth of Max beside her. He had always been more than just a dog to her. He was family, and family, she knew, was everything. The two of them stood there for a moment, taking in the quiet of the evening, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. Sarah reached down and scratched Max behind his ears, watching as his tail wagged in response. It was the same wag she remembered from all those years ago, when everything in the world seemed so simple. But now things had changed. The world had become a much harder place. And yet, Sarah knew that as long as Max was by her side, she could handle whatever came their way. Together, they were unstoppable. The night was just beginning, and they were ready for whatever came next. Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. The air was thick with the sound of traffic in the distance, but in that small corner of the city, everything was still. Max sat beside her, his body radiating warmth against the cool evening breeze. She was aware of every inch of him, from the soft, familiar texture of his coat to the way his amber eyes followed her every movement. It was as if he was waiting for her to make the next move. "We've got this, Max," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with the emotion she had kept locked away for so long. Her fingers ran through his fur, and she felt the same bond she had felt all those years ago. But this time, things were different. Max wasn't just a dog. He was her partner, and they were a team again. As she stood there, her mind wandered back to the moment when everything had started to change. After her father's passing, Sarah had felt lost. She had tried to stay on the path her father had set, but without Max by her side, it was like the light had gone out of her life. She missed him. She missed the sense of security and purpose that came with having Max at her side. But now, everything had shifted. Max was here, and together, they could face anything. The thought of what was coming next lingered in her mind, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. Max had been through so much, and so had she. They both knew how to fight, how to survive. The city's lights flickered around them, casting long shadows across the street. Max's tail wagged slowly, the familiar movement bringing a smile to Sarah's face. It was strange how something so small could bring so much comfort. She glanced down at him, meeting his gaze. There was understanding there, deep and unspoken. Max had always been able to read her like no one else could. Sarah took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She wasn't going to let fear take over. Not now. Not when they were so close to being reunited with the team Max had been working with. Sarah had no doubt that Max was capable of more than she could even imagine. He had always been the one to push through the toughest situations, the one to protect everyone around him. She remembered the way her father would speak about Max, about his intelligence and loyalty. There was a reason he had been one of the best K9s on the force. Max was a hero in his own right. But Sarah couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The unit Max had been working with had been struggling, and the pressure was beginning to take its toll. She knew it was only a matter of time before things got harder. The sound of footsteps pulled her back to the present. She looked up and saw a figure approaching, the outline of a police officer in the dim light. Sarah didn't need to be told who it was. She knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. The reunion wasn't just about her and Max. It was about reconnecting with the people who had been on the front lines with him, the team that had shared in his victories and losses. Max was a part of something bigger than just Sarah and him. He was a part of a family. The officer stopped in front of them, giving a nod of recognition. "You found him," he said, his voice filled with relief. Sarah didn't need to say anything. She just looked at Max, and the dog's calm demeanor spoke volumes. They were ready. They were home. The officer stood there for a moment, his eyes scanning Sarah and Max, as if confirming what he had hoped for. He nodded slowly, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "He's been waiting for you," he said, almost as if to reassure Sarah that this reunion was exactly what Max had been needing. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, her chest tightening with emotions she hadn't realized she had been holding back. Max was here, and everything else seemed to fall into place. She took a deep breath and reached out to pat his head gently. Max responded by pressing his head into her hand, his eyes still locked on hers, filled with trust and understanding. It was clear that he was as much a part of this moment as she was. They had been through so much together, and now, in this quiet corner of the city, they were finding their way back to each other. The officer continued, his voice steady but filled with respect. We've got a few more steps to take, but Max is a part of this team. He's been through the hardest of it all. You just have to trust him. Sarah nodded, her hand still resting on Max's fur. She had no doubt that Max was capable of anything. She had seen his strength and loyalty firsthand. But this time, it wasn't just about what Max could do. It was about what they could do together. The next few days were a blur of planning, paperwork, and long hours as Sarah got caught up with the team. She wasn't in it alone anymore. Max was there, by her side, just like he had always been. And as the days passed, Sarah began to feel that old sense of purpose returning to her. She was exactly where she was meant to be. There were moments, however, when doubt crept in. What if things didn't go as planned? What if Max was no longer the same dog she remembered? But those moments were fleeting, as each time she looked at Max, she saw the same unwavering loyalty, the same sharp focus that had always been there. He had never wavered. Not when he had been forced to move on, not when their lives had changed. He was always ready to give everything for the team, for the mission, for her. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting with the team, Sarah found herself alone with Max in a quiet room. She sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall, and Max immediately curled up next to her, resting his head on her lap. The world outside seemed to fade, and for that brief moment, it was just the two of them, their connection stronger than ever. Sarah ran her fingers through his fur, her mind at ease. They had come so far, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Max was more than just a dog. He was her companion, her partner, her family. She smiled softly, feeling a sense of gratitude flood her heart. Whatever the future held, they were ready. Max's tail wagged gently as if he, too, understood that they had found their way back to each other, and nothing would ever break the bond they shared. The weeks passed, and Sarah found herself adjusting to the rhythm of life with Max once again. The unease that had once lingered in her chest began to fade, replaced with a quiet confidence that she hadn't realized she had been missing. Each day, Max's presence reminded her of the strength they shared, and it felt as though the world outside was falling into place, piece by piece. Yet, even in this calm, Sarah could sense the weight of the challenges ahead. Max had never been just a dog to her. He had always been a protector, a constant source of reassurance in times of uncertainty. But now, they were partners in a mission far larger than either of them had anticipated. One evening, after a long day of preparations and meetings, Sarah found herself standing outside, Max by her side as they watched the city lights twinkle below. It was a rare moment of peace, and she found herself taking it all in. Max's steady breathing, the gentle rustling of the trees in the breeze, the soft hum of the world continuing around them. "We've come a long way, huh, boy?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears. Max turned his head toward her, his amber eyes bright and calm, as if acknowledging the journey they had both been on. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. She had never imagined that after all this time, after so many years apart, they would be standing here together, ready to take on whatever lay ahead. She thought back to the moment when Max had recognized her on the street, how the brief touch of his nose against her hand had sparked something within her. It had been like no time had passed at all. And even now, as she stood with him, she realized that their bond was something deeper than the years of separation. It was timeless, unbreakable. "You've been through so much, Max," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "And so have I. But now we're in this together. No more running, no more waiting." Max shifted beside her, nuzzling her arm in response, as if understanding every word she spoke. They had both faced loss, both been torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. But now, as they stood side by side, there was a sense of peace that came from knowing they were united. In the days that followed, Sarah and Max worked tirelessly, preparing for the next phase of the mission. They were not just a team, they were a family, and they would do whatever it took to protect one another. Sarah had always known the value of loyalty, but being with Max again reminded her just how powerful that bond could be. As the day of the mission drew closer, Sarah felt a mix of anticipation and resolve. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. With Max by her side, she knew they could face anything. Together, they were unstoppable. They had both learned the hard way that nothing worth having comes easily. But they had also learned that when you have someone you can count on, there is no obstacle too great to overcome. Max was no longer just her father's dog. He was her partner, her protector, her family. And as they prepared to take on whatever came next, Sarah knew one thing for certain. They would face it together, as they always had. The days leading up to the mission felt like a blur for Sarah. Every day was filled with briefings, strategy meetings, and final checks. She was determined to stay focused, knowing that Max was depending on her just as much as she was depending on him. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about proving to herself and everyone around her that together, they could face anything. There were moments, in the quiet of the early mornings, when Sarah would sit in the small office they had set up, staring at the maps and documents in front of her. She would glance over at Max, who was curled up beside her, his steady breathing filling the space. It was in those moments that she realized how much he had come to mean to her. He was more than just a dog. He was her anchor, her source of strength, and her reminder that loyalty and trust could overcome any obstacle. One morning, as they prepared to head out for one last round of practice before the mission, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led them here. From the moment she had made that silent signal to Max on the street, it had been clear that they were more than just a girl and her dog. They were a team, bound by something unspoken but incredibly strong. Max had been her protector, her companion, and now he was the only one who truly understood the weight of everything she was about to face. The morning sun peeked through the blinds, casting a soft glow on the floor. Sarah stretched her arms, taking in the moment of calm before the storm. She knew the mission was going to be difficult, but with Max by her side, she felt ready. "We've got this," she whispered to him as she stood up, her voice steady and confident. Max looked up at her, his amber eyes filled with understanding. He was ready, just like she was. They had spent hours training, rehearsing every move, every signal, and every possible scenario. Sarah knew the stakes were high, but she wasn't afraid. She had come to trust in herself, and more importantly, in the bond she shared with Max together. They had already overcome so much, and this mission would be no different. As they walked toward the door, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was different now. The uncertainty, the doubts that had once plagued her, were gone. Max had reminded her of what it meant to trust, completely and without hesitation. As they made their way to the training grounds, Sarah's mind was clear, focused. She felt a sense of calmness that she hadn't expected. The training had prepared them for every possible outcome, but it was the bond between her and Max that would see them through. They weren't just going into this as two individuals. They were going in as a team, stronger than ever. The rest of the team was already waiting at the training site when they arrived. Sarah could see the looks of respect in their eyes as she and Max approached. She nodded to them, acknowledging the shared understanding. They were all in this together, but for Sarah, it was clear that Max was her partner in a way no one else could be. As the team gathered around, final preparations began. There was no turning back now. This was their moment, and Sarah knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. She glanced down at Max, who stood beside her, his ears alert and his stance strong. She could see the same unwavering determination in him that she felt in herself. It wasn't just about completing the mission. It was about proving that loyalty and trust could conquer anything. With a deep breath, Sarah gave Max a gentle pat on the head. "Let's do this," she said softly. Max's tail gave a small wag in response, as if in agreement. They were ready. The day of the mission arrived, and Sarah stood at the edge of the training field, Max by her side. The morning air was cool, the kind of crispness that made everything feel sharper, more focused. The team was gathered around, ready for whatever came next, but Sarah's attention was on Max. He stood beside her, as calm and steady as ever, his amber eyes scanning the surroundings, his body alert but not tense. She could feel his presence beside her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt completely at ease. "You ready, boy?" she asked quietly, even though she already knew the answer. Max turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze, his tail giving a small, reassuring wag. He was ready. They had prepared for this moment together, trained for every possible scenario, And now, it was time to put everything they had learned into action. The team leader approached them, giving Sarah a nod. "It's time," he said. Sarah gave a slight nod in return, her mind clear and focused. She didn't need to say anything else. Max knew what to do, and she trusted him completely. The team moved into position, and Sarah followed their lead, Max never straying far from her side. They had been through so much together, and now they were about to face something that would test their bond in ways they hadn't imagined. As they advanced, Sarah's thoughts drifted to the early days of her training with Max, the moments when she had first realized how deeply connected they were. Max had always been there for her, his presence a constant source of comfort and security. And now, as they prepared for the mission, Sarah knew that this connection, this trust, was their greatest strength. The field was quiet, save for the sounds of the team moving into place and the soft rustle of the wind in the trees. Sarah's heart beat steadily in her chest, each thump a reminder of how far they had come. She glanced at Max once more, and for a brief moment, the two of them seemed to be the only ones on the field. The rest of the team melted away as she focused on the bond she shared with the dog at her side. They were a team, not just in name, but in every sense of the word. They had faced challenges before, but this time, Sarah felt something different. This time, they were ready. They had prepared, they had trained, and now, it was time to show everyone what they were made of. The team leader gave the signal, and with a shared look between Sarah and Max, they sprang into action. Everything around them moved in slow motion as Sarah's heart raced. She could hear the sound of Max's paws hitting the ground, the steady rhythm of his breath as he worked beside her. They were unstoppable, a force to be reckoned with. Every movement, every decision, was instinctual, guided by the bond they shared. Together, they moved with precision, fluid and united, knowing exactly what the other was thinking. As they navigated through the mission, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell in her chest. Max was doing exactly what he was trained to do, and he was doing it perfectly. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. They were a well-oiled machine, moving as one. Time passed in a blur, and before they knew it, the mission was complete. The team gathered around, their faces a mixture of relief and pride. Sarah looked down at Max, who was panting slightly but standing tall, his eyes bright with determination. They had done it. They had faced the challenge and come out victorious, together. As the team celebrated, Sarah knelt down beside Max, wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. "We did it, buddy," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Max nuzzled her gently, his tail wagging in satisfaction. It wasn't just about the mission. It was about the bond they had, the unspoken connection that had carried them through. And for Sarah, that was the greatest victory of all. As the days passed after the mission, Sarah couldn't shake the sense of fulfillment that lingered. The success they had achieved together, her and Max, wasn't just about completing the task at hand. It was a reaffirmation of the strength they shared, the bond that had been tested time and time again. She stood by the window of her small office, looking out at the city as it moved on with its usual rhythm. It felt different now, quieter somehow, as if the world had slowed just enough for her to appreciate the peace that had come with their victory. Max was lying on the floor beside her, his head resting on his paws, the weariness of the mission still apparent in the way his eyes half closed in contentment. Sarah had always known Max was special. His loyalty, his unwavering determination, had been evident from the first moment they met. But now, after everything they had been through together, she understood just how deep that bond ran. They had not only survived the challenges they faced on the mission, but they had also grown stronger, more connected in ways she hadn't expected. It was as if they had become one, each move instinctively understood, each decision made in sync. Sarah glanced at Max again, a smile tugging at her lips. It was hard to believe that just months ago, they had been separated, each of them living in their own world, the connection between them a distant memory. Now, it felt as though they had never been apart. Max's presence brought a sense of calm to Sarah that nothing else could. She had always felt like a part of her was missing, like there was a piece of her soul that had been left behind when her father passed. But with Max, that missing piece was found. Together, they made sense of the chaos. They found purpose in the uncertainty. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, and there were always challenges to face. But with Max by her side, Sarah felt as though she could face anything. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself becoming more involved with the team again, her confidence growing with each passing day. She was no longer the uncertain young woman who had walked into the force years ago. She had found her footing, and she knew exactly who she was, what she was capable of. And she knew that Max was a huge part of that transformation. He had been with her through the highs and lows, never once questioning her, never once doubting her. It was the kind of loyalty that most people only dreamed of. And Sarah, for the first time in years, felt like she had finally found her place in the world. The weight that had once pressed down on her chest, the uncertainty that had followed her every step, had lifted. She was home, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense as well. Max had helped her find that home within herself. It wasn't just about the mission anymore, or the job. It was about the bond they had, the family they had become. Together, they had built something that couldn't be broken, something that would endure no matter what life threw at them next. As time went on, Sarah and Max settled into a routine that felt both comforting and fulfilling. The days of uncertainty, the days when Sarah had questioned her place in the world, were behind her. She now walked with purpose, her confidence no longer fleeting but solid. It was the kind of strength that came from knowing she had something, someone, by her side who would never let her fall. Max had proven that time and again. Every morning, Sarah would take him for a walk before the day began, a quiet moment where it was just the two of them, side by side. The world around them was still asleep, and it gave Sarah a sense of peace, knowing that they had this time together. She could feel Max's energy beside her, his presence as reassuring as ever. He walked with his usual calm demeanor, never rushing, always aware of everything around him. Sarah was grateful for this calm. In a world that was often chaotic, Max was her anchor. The bond they shared was unspoken but deep, and Sarah knew that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sarah reflected on everything they had been through. The mission, the days of training, and the moments of doubt that had threatened to overwhelm her. It all seemed so far away now. She realized that she had found something much more important than success or recognition. She had found peace, and that peace came from knowing that the bond between her and Max was unbreakable. Max was no longer just a dog. He had become her partner in every sense of the word. They had built a life together, not just one of survival, but of understanding, of trust, and of quiet moments like this one. As Sarah looked down at Max, his head resting on his paws, she knew that their journey together was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more missions to undertake, but they would face it all as they always had, together. Sarah smiled softly, reaching down to gently scratch behind his ears. He lifted his head to look at her, his eyes full of understanding. She didn't need to say anything. Max already knew. They were a team, and nothing could change that. As the days passed, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a member of the team anymore. She was part of something greater. With Max by her side, she had found her place in the world, and she was ready to take on whatever came next. No matter what challenges the future held, Sarah knew one thing for certain. She and Max would face it together, side by side, just like they always had. And as long as they had each other, nothing could stand in their way.